Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Libby Collins, and I'm joined by Matthew Bourne. This webinar is for the Side Business School, and it's part of our series on In the Pursuit of Beauty and how art, ethics, and enterprise intertwine is the topic of this particular webinar. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go into the discussion?
Okay, yeah. My name is Matthew Bourne, and I'm co-founder of a rug and textile business called Christopher Farr. It was founded in 1988, and our first shop was in Primrose Hill in North London. And since then, we've been moving steadily west. We now have a showroom in Kings Road and a studio in Shoreditch. We have a showroom in New York and a showroom in Los Angeles. Yeah, that was nearly 40 years ago.
Goodness. Well, so we've got the exhibition at the business school with some of the Christopher Farr editions rugs. And if you haven't seen it, I do urge everybody to go. There are walking tours, and the next one is coming up on the 19th of June. So that's the opportunity for everybody to go and sort of meet one of the curators and talk about the exhibition. But today we're going to have a conversation about how you got to where you are, Matt, and your amazing business that you produced and how you work with artists. And I think it's a really interesting conversation to be having in the context of the business school about how kind of art and creativity can inspire us, but also be a mirror for I guess, running a business, if you think about art, it's a creative activity. And I feel personally that, as a business owner, running a business can also be creative. You have to be responsive, you have to tackle problems and be innovative. And all of these things, to me, seem to be very much part of your journey. I'd love to know more about why you set up the business and what brought you and your co-founder, Christopher Farr, together back in the early days.
Well, both Christopher and I were working in the antique carpet business, actually, back in London in the 1980s, when the antique carpet business was the main market for nice carpets for domestic interiors. That was it. Basically, at the higher end, there was only antique carpets at that time. And there was a very famous dealer called David Black, who was in Notting Hill Gate, and Christopher was working for him on the sales side, and I was working for him on the restoration side, and that's where I met Chris. And then Chris said, "I'm setting up my own business in Primrose Hill. Do you want to come and work with me there?" And we had a workshop in the back of that first showroom, and so that's how it started, and that's why the name is Christopher Farr. He set it up. And then I became a partner, and I'm still here.
So he set up but brought you on board as a restorer. But I guess that was one of your skill sets.
That was just to kind of as an incentive to get me working in the showroom with him. Right. So missed out an important bit here. Christopher was an artist who trained as an artist at the Slade School of Art and wanted to bring his own sort of ideas for designs and get them made in Turkey, which is at that time was one of the places where you would get carpets made. So that was his idea for setting up the business. But we were in the antique rug business to start with, so that's where we started.
And so do you think it's fair to say that you saw a gap in the market with him being an artist and the kind of, the trends of people buying? Do you think that's what kind of, was it about him trying to express his creativity in this format, or was it about a gap in a market that you discovered?
I think it was more about expressing creativity. We didn't know that there was a gap in the market, really. Okay. It was Chris's idea to do his designs and get them made, and we did that, and we would show those in the showroom alongside the antique rugs that we sold, big carpets, and then about 1992, I think, or not 91, 3 years after we'd started, we were approached by someone at the Royal College of Art to collaborate with their textile students So, they obviously realised that Chris was getting these things made, and they thought would be a good idea. And so with Kate Lee and Chris, they did sort of seminars at the Royal College of Art with the textile students there, and we came up with an exhibition which we had the opportunity to show in the main gallery space of the Royal College of Art, which is a wonderful space as you walk in, right in the middle of London, on the edge of Hyde Park there. And it was very successful, and the reaction to it. And this was in '91, which was a fierce recession. I mean, it was really a bad economic moment in the UK at that time. And it was very well received, and we started selling these things off the wall. And for us, that was like, oh my God, this hasn't happened before. And we didn't buy another antique carpet commercially from that day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, literally.
Well, that's amazing.
That moment to stop buying antique carpets and just to concentrate solely on this. Yeah.
Because that was going to be one of my questions. That particular exhibition was called Brave New Rugs, which I love the title of that exhibition, because it feels like you were sort of foreseeing the brave new world of your business sort of changing. And it was a sellout and marked the turning point in the direction of the company. And I was thinking, apart from not buying any more antique rugs, like, what did that look like for you as a business owner? Like, how did it actually change your business sort of in the next sort of, I guess I'm just thinking, like, in the next 6 months, what did that look like? Was it more orders? Was it kind of, how did it feel like everything had changed?
Well, it kind of lit a creative fuse, I suppose. And we started at that point, and then we started collaborating. We started working with some artists, one called Bill Jacklin, another one, someone from the fashion world called Maxime de la Falaise. And then we started doing those exhibitions in our own showroom in Primrose Hill, and they were equally well received. And we started entering a different world to the one we'd come from, which was basically, as I keep saying, selling antique carpets to people with very nice houses. And suddenly we started meeting all these different people. And then we were invited to partake in a show in 1992 with a fashion designer called Romeo Gili, who at the time was, quite a big noise in the fashion world. We've shown him in Paris and Milan. Very good fashion. And we collaborated with him to design some carpets, which we showed as part of the Salone, the Milan Furniture Fair, which in those days was a much smaller event than it is now, but it was still very important. And again, that was a big success. And I think we were the only rugs being shown then in that fair. Lots of furniture. And I think, as far as I was aware, we were the only rugs being shown. Maybe there might have been a couple of other brands, but if you go there now, there's 50 rug brands showing.
So would it be true to say that you, in a sense, followed the money? If this is where, and the creativity. I mean, I'm just thinking, like, how did it feel?
I don't think
but I was thinking more about, how did it feel to not be buying the antique rugs anymore? Like, if that was the passion that brought you together, how did that feel? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I've started buying them again now, funnily enough.
Okay.
Keep them all in a bag, cram them into my house.
But, okay, so that's still a passion, because that's what I was wondering. So you kind of let go of something in your business.
Well, it's a passion that's always remained with us. That the fact that we come from the antique carpet world, I think we're quite unusual in our small industry in that sense. There's a few others that started with antiques and are now doing contemporary. But there's a lot of people in our industry who are not from the rug world. They're more from the product world, and they've chosen to do rugs rather than chairs, for instance. There's quite a few that, and I'm sure they're doing very well. But it wasn't, to answer your question, it wasn't following the money. It was really following a passion, to be honest with you, because we were doing quite well selling antique carpets. We were making, the business was going well, although that, in '91, as I said, was a bad recession.
So what was it about? Was it the collaboration? Was it the kind of working with the artists directly that, and creating something new and having a kind of a part of that? Was that what kind of inspired you to follow this direction?
I think that's what fired Chris a lot, yeah. And obviously I found that very interesting also. But from my side, I was very interested in how things were made and getting things made and going to the countries and getting them produced and collaborating with the people who actually make the stuff. So at that moment, that's kind of how it split a bit, I would say, in the roles that we did. Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting because yeah, I was interested about your different roles, but also I know that the sourcing and the making is really important to you and to Christopher as a company. Could you tell us more about that and how I guess that has guided a lot of your decision making, and putting your values ahead of profit, I guess. I'd love for you to speak about that a bit.
Well, yes. I mean, we like to make carpets where they make really nice carpets. So, we still work in Turkey to a small degree, where it's nearly died out now, handmade carpet making. But we were with a very good Cuban producer there who has set up a sort of unbelievably good workshop to keep it alive. That's kind of his mission. So we work with him there. And we work with Turquoise Mountain in Afghanistan, where they also make carpets beautifully and have done for thousands of years. In both those countries, Turkey and Afghanistan, have a carpet tradition that goes back thousands of years. We also work a lot in India, and that is now one of the main production areas for handmade carpets. And we work with a couple of very small, well, small is the wrong word, but kind of specialized mills there that can work to a high level on a custom basis. And unlike the rugs that you're showing at Side Business School, which we keep in stock, the bulk of our business is custom made carpets for sort of high end residential and commercial projects. And then, so you have to work with producers that are geared to meeting the requirements of that business. So there's a lot of sampling involved. Lead times are very important. Accuracy is important. So we're not working with big commercial producers who are churning out tons and tons of carpets for department stores. It's kind of the opposite of that. We're working with people who work at a very kind of niche level.
Well, that's really interesting because I was thinking, to keep that integrity and authenticity really at the heart and to work with people on an individual basis who are producing such a custom made item, which isn't sort of off the shelf, takes a certain set of interpersonal skills, I guess, from you, and an understanding of the creative processes. And how do you work with your clients on that, and how do you kind of communicate that if there are sort of all of these kind of different tensions in the process that you're trying to kind of keep the standards and the values all along the kind of all along the line?
Good question, actually. I mean, that's kind of our job is to be the bridge between our customers' needs and the reality of getting this stuff done.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's quite a lot of hand holding involved and then explaining to do, and also got quite a lot of troubleshooting to do. That is definitely part of the job description. There are daily issues that arise about just the normal things that any business deals with, I guess, like logistics. Something's stuck here, something's there, this colour's not quite right. And there's a lot of, picking up the phone to India or Afghanistan and picking up the phone to a designer in West London, and doing both. So in a way, you've kind of got an eye on these two very different worlds.
That's rather nice. You're kind of like a mediator, I guess. And I guess with the creative processes and with a creative business like yours, and there is going to be a sort of a sense of bespokeness. So the products are going to be unique. And I guess it's kind of mediating that with people as well. And you can't really automate that in the sense of, and it's probably a business in that sense you can't grow to some extent. It has to be, and because you've got a certain amount of producers that you work with and you work to a certain level. So I'm just imagining that, it probably has grown to a point where you're comfortable with. I guess I'm going to answer my own question. I guess my question is like, when you're working with creatives, is there a kind of limit to the amount of growth that you feel like you can do if you're going to work in an authentic way?
Well, yeah, I guess by definition there is a limit. I think, the more, I mean, the bigger in our sector, the bigger you want to be, the more commercial you're going to have to be. So that by definition is going to influence the way you make things and what you make. So the wider the audience gets, the bigger your market will be, but then you're going to have to make more. I think your production and the products you make at that point are going to become more and more generic. So yeah, I mean, it's never really interested us to make carpets that we don't personally love. We do have to make things quickly sometimes, and we have methods of making them quickly. But however, whatever type of carpet we make, we always, our focus is always to make it as good as it can be within the limitations of any one technique. So if that makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense. I guess it also, we were talking earlier about, or in our previous conversation before recording today, about Christopher Cloth. And I guess it's probably quite a good moment to start talking about that business decision where you were thinking about there's another opportunity, within what you were doing, working within the textile industry, and how you divided the business kind of quite early on.
Yeah, so we were approached by Michal Silva at the turn of the century. God, that makes us sound old, doesn't it? Around 2000, with an idea to extend the kind of business idea, which was basically a collaborative textile business model, was what we were doing, collaborating with people who aren't from our world, drawing them in and making products. So, from this traditional handmaking carpet thing that we came from, and then collaborating with people from other worlds and producing things. And Michal came to us with this idea to extend this into the fabric business. And it seemed fairly obvious to me and us that the fabric business is a much bigger market and a more accessible product than handmade carpets. So, there are cushions, there's fabric for chairs, there's fabric for sofas, there's curtains, there's blinds, there's wallpaper. So yeah, we started that business as a separate business with Michal running it. And today it's a very successful global business, and Michal still runs it. And we share a showroom actually in London on the King's Road. So
I think that's so interesting because there you have the intention side by side, the kind of bespoke and the kind of slightly more mass market. So you have found a way to do the two with integrity by sort of.
Yeah, I mean, yes, we have. I think we have. I mean, anyone looking at this is more than welcome to come and see how that appears in our showroom in London. But the business model is the same. So in the creative business model is the same. So again, we do rugs with say a US design firm called Commune. We also do fabrics with that design firm. We do rugs with Günter Sturzel, and now we're thinking of doing fabrics with Günter Sturzel, who's from the Bauhaus, and so on. So, but they're not. We don't. We also have things that are just rugs and things that are just fabrics. But again, the idea behind it is the same one that we started with 40 years ago, which is a collaborative ethos. Yeah.
I love the fact that you've got collaboration at the heart of everything you've done, and I guess is that something that you found has become easier with time as your brand becomes known? That you're getting more approaches for collaboration. I guess, are there certain artists in your sites that you haven't worked with yet, or I guess you can't necessarily say that, but have you've worked with some amazing artists, haven't you? I mean, you've worked with Ai Weiwei.
Yeah. And also, of course, there are people we'd love to work with, but as they don't know yet, I will keep that to myself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I guess you've done amazing things with lots of estates of artists like the Omega Group, and Joseph and Annie Albers. And personally, I think your rugs are a wonderful way of kind of accessing their designs, on a kind of domestic scale or domestic level, but having access is amazing kind of international leaders of design. I think it's a really fabulous thing that you've been doing.
Well, that's quite interesting. That's another interesting bit of our job is that the two different strands of collaboration. So when you're dealing with the states, that's one thing because you're dealing with basically the custodians of a heritage. So it could be the family of an artist, or it could be a foundation, and their job is basically to be the custodian of that person's work. But the person who made the work is no longer here. So that, in a way, can be more complicated than if the artist is a living person. Because if the say we make a sample of a carpet and it comes slightly differently than the foundation or the estate were expecting, we'll probably, 9 times out of 10, we're going to have to make that sample again until we meet their expectation. Whereas if you're presenting it to a living person, they might say, "Oh yeah, that's not quite what I thought, but actually I like it."
Yeah. Okay.
And then it might then at that point go off in a different direction, or they might say, "No, actually, even though it's not, that bit isn't what I meant, I actually think it works, so let's go with that." So you eliminate that possibility. So it's two different kind of approaches you have to take.
Or so I guess one is co-creative, isn't it? So when you're working with somebody living, it's co-creative, and the mistakes or the things that arise become part of the process.
Yeah. Whereas the foundation, quite rightly, will be very particular because they don't have the license to be anything else other than particular.
Yeah, and that's about legacy and honouring somebody's heritage. So quite different. You also do commissions, don't you? So you famously did a commission for Karl Lagerfeld. Wonder if you can tell us about that and how that arose.
Well, we make a lot of things to order. So he'd seen an advertisement in a magazine, and he sent in he cut out the advertisement from the magazine, old materials actually, and put it in one of his envelopes and sent it to us with a handwritten letter saying, "How much is this?" Actually, he wrote, "How much is this?" on the advert, which he'd pasted into a folder. And I'm guessing he did this himself because it was all in his own handwriting. And there was just a fax number underneath, and that was all I had.
A fax, that dates it.
Yeah, that kind of dates this. Wasn't that long ago, actually. It was like 2010, when still just about existed. But I did have one, otherwise I might have had a problem. And then we had this sort of fax conversation, and then you'd say, so I sent him a catalogue. Obviously, I think he bought that carpet, and then which I had in stock, and then I sent him a catalogue, and then he just sent another one with all the pages marked up, saying, "I want this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one." Again, with this FedEx envelope that would come with your KL on it. I kept all this stuff. I've got all these handwritten notes, and we actually called it lager mail in the end because
lager mail
went on for about 3 or 4 months, and we ended up making a large amount of carpets for him. Yeah, but it was.
Did you ever meet him?
Never did. No. Never met him, and I actually rather naively once wanted to speak to him about something and phoned up his office and said, "Can I speak to Karl Lagerfeld?" They just kind of said to me, "Forget it," and put down the phone. So all I had a fax number which I subsequently found out was his accountant's fax number.
Oh right, I love the idea of lager mail. And you were saying that was an advertisement. So I guess how have you found that your business has grown and how you've managed to build this reputation and what are the channels that you've used in the years that have been successful, and has it been a lot of trial and error, or has it literally been the products that people encounter have then sort of sold itself? It'd be really fascinating to know.
What we've always done is done collaborations allied to events around those collaborations, whether they be in this country or abroad. Obviously, now we have business in America, we do events there, but we've done numerous things in Italy and other countries too. But it's always around a collaboration. So we don't just turn up with some rugs. There's always a story around it.
Yeah.
And we've always been quite sort of active in getting that written about in the press, and over the years had some very good articles written about what we do. And we have backed that up with print advertising over the decades, but that hasn't been our main means of publicising ourselves. It's generally been around the collaborations we do and the events we do.
Yeah. So the in-person events, so that's quite interesting. Somebody said to me the other day that we're moving into an event economy, and that kind of interpersonal relationship and that in-person collaboration is more and more important, or meeting people and having that experience. And I think with creative businesses, it's got to be, hasn't it? But then, the internet is also, very important for people. How much do you find, the digital age is influencing your business, or is it still very much about these events?
Well, I understand Instagram is very important, and we have someone who runs Instagram for us, and yeah, I'm sure it is important, and you need that digital presence. But do we? I find it hard to actually measure that. To be honest with you, it's quite unusual that we get an inquiry saying, "I saw your rug on Instagram." But I guess it's all part of the same picture, and you need to do all these things to keep yourselves at in the mind of your potential customers and your existing customers. But in the end, it's all about relationships. Your customers, potential customers, have a range of people that they can work with, and in the end, it's the one that they want to work with that they will work with.
It's so interesting. Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's Instagram, because I have a business as well, and it's almost like there's this feeling that you need to be on Instagram, but then it almost feels like actually what actual results do you get from Instagram, apart from somehow it builds kind of brand identity and respect, but I'm not sure how much it actually helps with direct leads. And I guess it sort of links into another kind of question. So at the beginning of your business, you were very much kind of pioneers in this marketplace. And now the kind of marketplaces have changed a lot. There are other rock companies around, dare we say.
Yeah.
And how has that affected, how have you kind of flexed in the market, and how has it affected your business and the way you see yourselves and how you present yourselves? How do you cope with that competition? And at Christopher, what is it that you do to keep your story in people's minds?
Well, yes, I mean that's a very good question. But just to go back to the beginning of your question, when we started, as I said, the market was antique carpets. Now now we're at the point 40 years later where the antique carpet market at the kind of domestic consumer level has almost disappeared. So it's a great time, by the way, to buy antique carpets. It's a great time to buy brown furniture as well, because it is probably the cheapest it's ever been in my lifetime in relative terms. So now the market is custom-made contemporary rugs. That's it. There's many companies all over the world. There's lots of fairs. As I said, if you go to Milan Fair, there's numerous companies involved now, all doing kind of similar collaborative things to what we started doing 40 years ago, and doing it, in many cases very well. And how do we cope with the competition? Well, you just continue what you're doing. You have to keep believing in the approach you take. And we try to stick to making things as well as we can, and we try to make things that are differential in some way in terms of design or technique. So, but again, it's still passion led. We still often think, "Oh, I'd love to do that," and then you do it, and you just hope everyone likes it. Which isn't very businesslike, I know. What you're supposed to do is saying, "What does everyone want? Let's go and make that." And I'm sure there are bigger companies than us do exactly that, but it's not what we've ever done. It's always been the other way around, which maybe is the smartest thing, but there it is.
Well, I think that perhaps centers the creativity rather than a market forces. And I know that, you're, looking at your values, excellence is part of that. And I guess if you're offering something out that you truly believe in, then you're kind of fulfilling that particular value.
Yeah.
And it's also keeping that sort of sense of authenticity right at the core of what you do.
Yeah.
And that there's a strength in that, I think.
Yeah. And also, if you get a reputation for being good at what you do and reliable, and people want to work with you and like you, then if they, often we work with interior designers and we make their designs. They say, I want this made, can you make it for me? And we will do that. Of course we'll do that. Our job is to produce carpets. And so that's kind of that is a sort of benefit of the kind of more high profile stuff you do, is that you build a reputation for making nice things.
Absolutely. And do you think some of your values in terms of your sourcing, the way you work with your workers, do you think that's something, I know that's important to you, but do you think that's something that the consumer also knows enough about, and when making their decisions, do you think that's something that differentiates you as well?
Well, I think it's something that has become very important. Quite rightly, it's becoming more important. I think it has there's more emphasis on in different markets in this country. I think it's quite an issue. Things like the supply chain questions, and it's something that we do address. We work with fair trade partners, and to answer your question, yes, it is important to have a fair trade partner, and it's important for us to let our customers know that we have a fair trade partner. So we do, and we, the workshop I was talking to you about in Turkey, we actually did a project with those weavers, and we actually promoted them as, in their own right, as human beings and their artistic skills. We just said, you can make what you want. It just has to be 1 square meter, and we exhibited it here in our Shoreditch studio for London Design Festival, and we did the same show in Istanbul, and it went very well. It was very well received, and it was actually a very exciting project to do. But again, commercial. It was more about the project and the kind of, we're going to sell those because you're not.
But I wonder if people's buying practices are changing, or whether businesses that do the kind of things that you do now, like you say, putting the creative makers more forward in the practice, providing these exhibitions makes you, it is kind of that dual thing of, it makes you more attractive to buy from, and people are kind of much more aware of the impact of globalization. And I wonder whether it's something that you've been doing, but actually it's really, not only the right thing to be doing from an ethical point of view, but the right thing to be doing for a business in the current market.
Well, I think it's going to be, is the answer to your question. I think it's still fairly low on the agenda at the moment, but I think in the future it's going to become far more of a thing that people are going to want to know more about, where not just carpets are made, but where everything else is made and how it's made. The thing coming up now is animals, not only weaver welfare or human welfare, is now animal welfare is now a thing that's emerging in our business. And so we're going to have to start thinking about that. And so all these things are part of the same kind of level of consciousness that consumers are developing. And I think that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
But I'm being naive. But how is animal welfare? How does that thinking with rugs?
Well, for instance, because rugs are generally made out of wool.
Oh, of course, wool.
So New Zealand, which is the major supplier for wool in the world, not just for rugs, everything else. They kind of basically in the mass wool market. We don't we use very little New Zealand wool. We tend to use wool in the countries where the carpets are made. They're now doing wool certification for animal welfare.
Right.
And now, given that they're 90% of the wool market, there's a distinct possibility this is going to become a requirement in places like the EU or the United States for anything that's made of wool. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but it's a possibility. And it's going to become a requirement that, you know, you have to have this certification for anything made out of wool. Maybe not, maybe, but I mean, it's a possibility. So so it's basically a certificate saying this sheep has been well treated, is what it is.
No, that's important. It's interesting, isn't it, to see, thinking about, you know, the growth and development of your business, that these are all issues and good issues that we're discussing that you wouldn't have had to discuss if you'd stayed with antique rugs, for example. But I guess there may have been other things. But I guess that's part of running a business. You learn new things.
Yeah, exactly. I'd have never had to know any of this stuff. So yeah, it's been quite an interesting journey. I do actually find it all quite interesting. So all that stuff.
I imagine you must do to have run it so successfully over the last 40 years. Have you got any exciting projects coming up or any collaborations, obviously apart from one we're doing at the business school?
We do, but I'm trying to think what's actually been signed off at the moment. I could talk about, and there is one very interesting one coming up, but I've actually got a meeting tomorrow to get it approved, so I can't talk about it yet.
You can't talk about that. Well, it's really lots of very amazing things to talk to you about, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions to ask you. But personally, as a business owner, also in the creative industry, I think what's so interesting is hearing about your journey from one part of the market through to another part of the market, and how much you've had to kind of develop your own skill sets as you know, managing that business. And I just wonder whether that's something that you see with the next generation, you know, with people coming through in your business. How are you passing it on, and do you feel as the business owner that you've got the next generation coming through? I mean, you know, in terms of succession planning for the business.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. In terms of generation, actually, funnily enough, my daughter works with me here, so that ticks the generational box. And Chris's nephew works with him in Los Angeles. So I guess that's quite, funnily enough, that's a bit of a throwback to the antique carpet world, because they tended to be generational businesses. But in terms of the wider generation, that's a good question. You know, there's lots of textile students who are interested, and yeah, I think it's, you know, it's quite an interesting world to be in, but it's a creative world, you know. So someone, a business student, thinking, you know, how can I become a millionaire? It's probably, we'll be looking at other areas other than contemporary rugs, although it can be profitable. It's not a big, massive, scalable business, really.
What would be your advice then for somebody looking to go into a creative business? You sort of touched on it there. It's perhaps not so much about profit, perhaps more about passion. But I'd love to know your biggest piece of advice.
Well, my advice would be to manage your, you know, identify what your motives are and your expectations. And, you know, if you want to be doing very artistic things and very creative things, then understand that the market is a smaller one than if you were going to be producing, say, T-shirts or something that's going to sell to tens of millions of people.
But you must get a thrill when you go into somebody's house and they've got one of your rugs, or you know, a rug that is also a bit of fabric that's your other business. You know, that must be quite thrilling to see the designs that you've worked on with artists in people's homes.
It is, yeah. What's really thrilling is when you see them in museums. And for instance, I don't know, you know, the subcommittee rooms that you see on the news sometimes at the House of Parliament in the new parliamentary building. You've got those big sort of tapestries behind where they're asking the questions.
Okay.
Yeah, so we made those about 30 years ago as an acoustic solution when they did that building. The BBC said we need something here to dampen down the sound. And they're still there, 30 years later. And when the news comes on and there's the son of poor MP being grilled by a committee, and there's the piece which is actually designed by Kate Blee sitting behind them. It's now part of the government art collection. So that, yeah, that is quite thrilling when you see things like that. Yeah, those are good moments.
Well, that's amazing, Matt. I honestly think that's a really good place to stop. Thank you so much for talking to me today, and to everyone here at the business school, and for helping us have this amazing exhibition,
Okay.
which couldn't happen without you. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.